Good morning, gardeners, and welcome to Thursday, August 10th. My name is Catherine, and I created a show called Good Morning Gardeners, even though I can't grow green things because I am referring to gardening metaphorically. We're planting the seeds for a better day. We're starting our morning by getting in the right mindset to cultivate a better life for ourselves, better communities, and a better world. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you'd like to add Good Morning Gardeners to your morning routine. I do my best to wake you up with positive and mentally stimulating ideas, but sometimes I miss things. If you have something to add to the ideas I discussed this morning, please chime in the comment section below. Also, before we get started, I need to remind you guys that I will be on vacation starting August 14th, so there will be no new episodes from Monday, August 14th through Friday, August 18th. During this time, I encourage you to continue your morning routine by listening to older episodes of Good Morning Gardeners that you haven't heard yet. And I should be back with you guys posting new episodes again on August 21st. Today's a daily Stoic reading titled Perfection is the Enemy of Action begins with a quote from Epictetus. We don't abandon our pursuits because we despair of ever perfecting them. And the authors add, psychologists speak of cognitive distortions, exaggerated thinking patterns that have a destructive impact on the life of the patient. One of the most common is known as all or nothing thinking, also referred to as splitting. Examples of this include thoughts like, if you're not with me, you're against me, so-and-so is good/bad, and because this wasn't a complete success, it's a total failure. This sort of extreme thinking is associated with depression and frustration. How could it not be? Perfectionism rarely begets perfection, only disappointment. Pragmatism has no such hang-ups. It'll take what it can get. That's what Epictetus is reminding us. We're never going to be perfect, if there is even such a thing. We're human after all. Our pursuits should be aimed at progress, however little that it's possible for us to make. So I think this makes the third day in a row that the Daily Stoic has hit on a topic of special significance to me. I'm sure we've all heard the saying, the perfect is the enemy of the good. Well, I have really, really struggled with terrible perfection paralysis my whole life, and I've used this phrase as a kind of mantra to help pull myself out of the trap of perfectionism. But I don't think that this phrase alone is enough to do the trick if your perfectionism is particularly bad. And yes, I do think perfectionism is bad. I know that it's been a popular mindset to call it a blessing and a curse, and claiming perfectionism as your greatest weakness during a job interview is kind of like a funny trope these days. But I think perfectionism is just a curse. It's not a humble brag. It's not a cute, quirky mix of good and bad. It's just bad, because it can be literally paralyzing. And perfectionism makes it much harder for us to make the mistakes which are so crucial to learning, discovery, and innovation. So this morning's episode is dedicated to releasing perfection paralysis and doing the work to battle perfectionism going forward. I often think of perfectionism as a compulsion or even an addiction. So if it's not totally inappropriate, maybe we can think of this episode as a meeting of Perfectionists Anonymous. Hello, my name is Catherine and I'm a perfectionist. And these are some of the books that have helped me. The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck by Manson, Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz, Doing Good Better by MacAskill, and This One Wild and Precious Life by Sarah Wilson. I'm going to begin our learning moment this morning by reading to you from Psycho-Cybernetics. Maxwell Maltz writes, many of my patients are plainly disappointed when I prescribe something as simple as using their God-given power of reason as a method of changing negative beliefs and behavior. To some, it seems incredibly naive and unscientific. Yet it does have one advantage. It works. And as we shall see later, it is based upon sound scientific findings. There is a widely accepted fallacy that rational, logical, conscious thinking has no power over unconscious processes or mechanisms, and that to change negative beliefs, feelings, or behavior, it is necessary to dig down and dredge up material from the unconscious. Your automatic mechanism, or what the Freudians call the unconscious, is absolutely impersonal. It operates as a machine and has no will of its own. It always tries to react appropriately to your current beliefs and interpretations concerning environment. It always seeks to give you appropriate feelings and to accomplish the goals which you consciously determine upon. It works only upon the data which you feed it in the form of ideas, beliefs, interpretations, and opinions. It is conscious thinking which is the control knob of your unconscious machine. It was by conscious thought, though perhaps irrational and unrealistic, that the unconscious machine developed its negative and inappropriate reaction patterns. And it is by conscious rational thought that the automatic reaction patterns can be changed. The fact that there are buried in the unconscious memories, failures, unpleasant and painful experiences does not mean that these must be dug out, exposed, or examined in order to effect personality changes. As we have pointed out earlier, all skill learning is accomplished by trial and error. By making a trial, missing the mark, consciously remembering the degree of error, and making correction on the next trial until finally a hit, or a successful attempt, is accomplished. The successful reaction pattern is then remembered or recalled and imitated on future trials. This is true for a man learning to pitch horseshoes, throw darts, sing, drive a car, play golf, get along socially with other human beings, or any other skill. It is also true of a mechanical rat learning its way through a maze. Thus, all servo mechanisms, by their very nature, contain memories of past errors, failures, painful and negative experiences. These negative experiences do not inhibit, but contribute to the learning process, as long as they're used properly as negative feedback data and are seen as deviations from the positive goal which is desired. However, as soon as the error has been recognized as such and correction of course has been made, it is equally important that the error should be consciously forgotten and the successful attempt be remembered and dwelt upon. These memories of past failures do not harm as long as our conscious thought and attention is focused upon the positive goal to be accomplished. Therefore, it is best to let these sleeping dogs lie. Our errors, mistakes, failures, and sometimes even our humiliations were necessary steps in the learning process. However, they were meant to be means to an end, and not an end by themselves. When they have served their purpose, they should be forgotten. If we consciously dwell upon the error, or consciously feel guilty about the error, and keep berating ourselves because of it, then unwittingly, the error or failure itself becomes the goal which is consciously held in imagination and memory. So the idea that I love from Psycho-Cybernetics is that there is a mechanism in my mind which is causing me to be a perfectionist, and that I can work on this mechanism as if it were a machine to produce a result that is not perfectionism, or at least more realistically, reduced perfectionism. Next, I am going to read to you from The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. Now, I really like this book for the gems that I read within, but if you decide to pick up your own copy, bear in mind that not everything Mark Manson writes here is solid. At least, that's my opinion. And that goes for any book. No one can be right about everything all the time. Which leads me to the chapter I will read from, which is titled, "You Are Wrong About Everything, But So Am I." 500 years ago, cartographers believed that California was an island. Doctors believed that slicing a person's arm open, or causing bleeding anywhere, could cure disease. Scientists believed that fire was made out of something called phlogiston. I probably didn't pronounce that correctly. Women believed that rubbing dog urine on their face had anti-aging benefits. Astronomers believed that the sun revolved around the earth. When I was a little boy, I used to think mediocre was a kind of vegetable that I didn't want to eat. I thought my brother had found a secret passageway in my grandmother's house because he could get outside without having to leave the bathroom. Spoiler alert, there was a window. I also thought that when my friend and his family visited Washington, B.C., they had somehow traveled back in time to when the dinosaurs lived, because after all, BC was a long time ago. As a teenager, I told everybody that I didn't care about anything, when the truth was I cared about way too much. Other people ruled my world without even knowing. I thought happiness was just a destiny and not a choice. I thought love was something that just happened, not something that you worked for. I thought being cool had to be practiced and learned from others, rather than invented for oneself. When I was with my first girlfriend, I thought we would be together forever. And then when that relationship ended, I thought I'd never feel the same way about a woman again. And then, when I felt the same way about a woman again, I thought that love sometimes just wasn't enough. And then I realized that each individual gets to decide what is enough, and that love can be whatever we let it be. Every step of the way, I was wrong. About everything. Throughout my life, I have been flat out wrong about myself, others, society, culture, the world, the universe, everything. And I hope that will continue to be the case for the rest of my life. Just as present Mark can look back on past Mark's every flaw and mistake, one day future Mark will look back on present Mark's assumptions, including the contents of this book, and notice similar flaws. And that will be a good thing, because that will mean I have grown. There's a famous Michael Jordan quote about him failing over and over again, and that's why he succeeded. Well, I'm always wrong about everything, over and over again, and that's why my life improves. Growth is an endlessly iterative process. When we learn something new, we don't go from wrong to right. Rather, we go from wrong to slightly less wrong. And when we learn something additional, we go from slightly less wrong to slightly less wrong than that, and then to even less wrong than that, and so on. Well, we are always in the process of approaching truth and perfection without ever actually reaching truth or perfection. We shouldn't seek to find the ultimate right answer for ourselves, but rather we should seek to chip away at the ways we're wrong today so we can be a little less wrong tomorrow. When viewed from this perspective, personal growth can actually be quite scientific. Our values are our hypotheses. This behavior is good and important. That other behavior is not. Our actions are the experiments. The resulting emotions and thought patterns are our data. There is no correct dogma or perfect ideology. There is only what your experience has shown you to be right for you. And even then, that experience is probably somewhat wrong too. And because you and I and everybody else all have differing needs and personal histories and life circumstances, we will all inevitably come to differing correct answers about what our life means and how our lives should be lived. My correct answer involves traveling alone for years on end, living in obscure places, and laughing at my own farts. Or at least that was the correct answer up until recently. That answer will change and evolve because I change and evolve. And as I grow older and more experienced, I chip away at how wrong I am, becoming less and less wrong every day. So yeah, hopefully that is pretty self-explanatory as to why that helped me get over perfection paralysis. And I think that that is a really good reminder for all of us that, you know, the idea of something being good or bad or right or wrong is a false choice, right? And the world is made up of more grays than we could possibly imagine. So striving for black or white is just kind of ridiculous. So for our feel-good moment, I'm going to begin by reading from Doing Good Better by William MacAskill. This book was originally published in 2015, so some of the information might be slightly out of date, but I believe that the general idea still holds up. In this book, MacAskill is addressing what he calls the world's richest 10%, who make $16,000 US per year or more. If that number doesn't sound high to you, that's probably because you live in what is commonly called the West or the developed world. I'm not here to gaslight you into believing that you are super rich if you are trying to live in the West on $16,000 per year, because I realize that's not even really possible. I'm simply reading this passage to put wealth, power, and the ability to affect change into perspective. For almost all of human history, from the evolution of Homo sapiens 200,000 years ago until the Industrial Revolution 250 years ago, the average income across all countries was the equivalent of $2 per day or less. Even now, more than half of the world still lives on $4 per day or less. Yet, through some outstanding stroke of luck, we have found ourselves as the inheritors of the most astonishing period of economic growth the world has ever seen, while a significant proportion of people stay as poor as they have ever been. Moreover, because of that economic progress, we live at a time in which we have the technology to easily gather information about people thousands of miles away, the ability to influence their lives, and the scientific knowledge to work out what the most effective ways of helping are. For these reasons, few people who have ever existed have had so much power to help others as we have today. Sometimes we look at the size of the problems in the world and think, anything I do would just be a drop in the bucket, so why bother? But in light of the research shown in this book, that reasoning doesn't make any sense. It's the size of the drop that matters, not the size of the bucket, and if we choose, we can create an enormous drop. We've already seen that we have the opportunity to provide a benefit for others that is 100 times greater than the benefit we could provide for ourselves. That we can't solve all the problems in the world doesn't alter in any way the fact that if we choose, we can transform the lives of thousands of people. And now, moving on to the last book that I am going to read from this morning, This One Wild and Precious Life by Sarah Wilson. This was actually the first of these books that I read, and this one was instrumental for me in breaking out of my perfection paralysis. I know that I have read this quote before, but I don't care because this idea is so powerful to me. In response to criticisms that she was not fit to lead a global climate movement due to her Asperger's, Greta Thunberg responded that before she got climate engaged, she self-harmed, suffered horrible OCD, and had become mute, talking only through her father. Before I started school striking, she said, I had no energy, no friends, and I didn't speak to anyone. I just sat at home alone with an eating disorder. All of that is gone now, since I have found a meaning in a world that sometimes seems meaningless to so many people. As Nietzsche said, when we have a why, we can handle any how. So, for our focus moment today, I want to prompt you to think about your why. For me, the mission of helping other people is very powerful, and I believe that in a previous episode, I have prompted you to consider who you can help. I may be projecting, but I'm guessing that for many of you, there will be quite a bit of overlap between today's answer and the answers that came up for you that day. There is quite a bit of similarity between why you choose to act and who you are helping by acting. For example, when I record this episode every morning, I think about all the amazing, brilliant people in my life who I've seen being held back, to one extent or another, by their mindset. So it's these people or people like them who I want to help with these videos. As for my why, I think about what a different world we could live in if all the wonderful, ethical people inhabiting it exerted more power. If thoughtful and compassionate people spoke out more. If more people with a strong sense of morality started businesses. If people who are creative and empathetic were empowered to create better ways of doing things. I think about my son and all the children I've known and loved, and how I don't want to leave them with a world that feels broken. I want to leave them with a better world than I was born into. And that's my why. I hope you found this helpful, and I hope you have a wonderful day. I will speak with you again tomorrow.